This is Greg with Telltale Books, coming back to you with another of my H.G. Wells reviews. This time, two of his short stories that are kind of sort of similar. The first one being The Remarkable Case of Davidson's Eyes, written in 1895, or at least published in 1895. The second one is the Plattner story, published in 1896. What both of these stories have in common is the idea of someone who, through an accident, gains the ability to see other places. In The Remarkable Case of Davidson's Eyes, the person in question is seeing some other place where there's a ship coming into a harbor, and he's walking through sand dunes and he can see penguins, clearly another spot on Earth, but definitely not any place local to England with penguins. And the ship was a specific ship. He saw the name of the ship and found out what and where that ship was. And so through an accident, Davidson was able to see another place on the Earth. The Plattner story has a similar sort of thing in that there's an accident, and the person who suffers in the accident suddenly is seeing this whole other world, but it's not an earthly world. It's something else with a greenish sun and these weird floating creatures and this long dark arm. And it becomes very Lovecraftian, very much of a cosmic horror story. Which leads me to wonder, did Wells have an influence on the whole Cthulhu mythos? Because the Cthulhu mythos, of course, has these creatures that come from another dimension, these horrible creatures that come from another dimension to Earth. In the Plattner story, Plattner is seeing into another dimension and seeing these weird globular creatures that kind of crowd around certain people, that he then, because he's still able to see something of the real world, these people at some point die, so these creatures are like following people that are going to die, making it very macabre, very disturbing, very weird, but very cosmic and very Lovecraftian. I don't know. I haven't read Lovecraft's letters or his book about supernatural fiction to know if H.G. Wells ever had any influence over him, but it seems pretty likely that the Plattner story did have an influence. And it's interesting that Wells, in such a short time, wrote two stories that were very fantastic, although he tried to make them kind of scientific, having accidents in science labs cause people to see other things. But of course, that's total fantasy. That idea of people being able to see other things like that is complete fantasy, not real science. So I think it's a stretch to call these stories science fiction. But they are from that period of time. They were actually published the same year as The Island of Dr. Moreau, very early in Wells's career, where he was mostly writing science fiction and fantasy, and he wrote some of his best work. He had this incredible burst of activity from about 1893 until 1899, where he's wrote all these novels and all these short stories. The vast majority of the short stories were written before 1899. In 1900, he just wrote the one book, Love and Mr. Lewisham, and then 1901, there's only 3 short stories and a novel and a nonfiction book. After that, just a smattering of short stories. Some years you have 4 or 5 short stories, other years nothing. Very interesting that he had such intense activity, and so much of it was science fiction and fantasy, and then not much else after that. But he did leave us this huge legacy of all these great short stories that all are foundation stories for science fiction, horror stories of the 20th, of all the years since Wells wrote these stories. He laid the groundwork for so much. And the Plattner story and Remarkable Case of Davidson's Eyes are 2 stories that once again seem to set the foundation that a lot of later fiction has been built upon. Excellent stories. I would check them out. Leave your comments on this video, especially if you've read these stories. If you haven't, go out and read them. Come back and leave your comments. But we want to hear from you. So like us, subscribe, share it with your friends if you like these videos. See you next time.